Major James Sullivan stood at rigid attention in the Pentagon's newly established extraterrestrial relations chamber, his weathered face masking the contempt he felt watching the Zexteri ambassador's hologram sneer at Earth's latest environmental preservation report. 23 years of Special Forces experience had taught him to read opponents, and everything about these aliens screamed of dangerous arrogance. "You mean to tell us?" Ambassador Kexthor's translated voice carried artificial pleasantness that barely concealed his disdain, "that you deliberately maintain these vast swaths of untamed wilderness, that you haven't even attempted to properly develop nearly 30% of your planetary surface?" Sullivan exchanged a quick glance with General Roberts, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Not yet. Let them keep underestimating us." The Zexteri's hologram shifted, its iridescent scales catching the light as it gestured to a projected map of Earth. The Amazon basin alone could house dozens of proper megalopolises. Instead, you let it remain a tangled mess of primitive vegetation. And these other areas. The aliens' upper appendage circled regions marking the Congo, Southeast Asian rainforests, and other wilderness areas. All wasted space. UN Secretary Chen cleared her throat. "Ambassador, as we explained, Earth's biodiversity and natural environments are crucial to our planet's ecological balance and our own survival. These areas are not wasted. They're essential." The translator conveyed her words, but Sullivan noticed the slight twitch in the alien's secondary breathing vents, a sign of amusement or derision, according to the hastily compiled xenobiology briefings. "Charming," Kexthor replied. "Your species clings to such quaint notions. The Zexteri dominion outgrew such primitive dependencies millennia ago. Our artificial ecosystems are far superior to any natural environment." Sullivan felt his jaw tighten. In his earpiece, a secure channel crackled to life. "Sierra Actual, maintain position. Intel gathering only." The voice belonged to Colonel Sarah Hayes, his direct superior and the architect of what was quickly becoming Earth's contingency plan. The meeting continued for another hour, with the Zexteri delegation barely concealing their growing contempt for Earth's backward ways. Sullivan observed every detail: their preference for synthetic materials, their obvious physical discomfort with Earth's natural atmosphere, their complete dismissal of anything not manufactured or artificially controlled. As the delegation prepared to terminate the holographic connection, Ambassador Kexthor delivered what he clearly thought was a generous offer. "The Dominion is willing to assist Earth in proper development. Under our guidance, these wasteland areas can be converted into productive urban centers within a standard solar cycle. Refusing such generosity would be unwise." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. After the transmission ended, the chamber erupted into urgent discussions. Sullivan slipped away, making his way to a secure underground facility where Colonel Hayes waited with representatives from other Special Forces units. "They've never fought in a jungle," Sullivan stated as he entered the room. It wasn't a question. Hayes nodded, her expression grim. "Their combat footage shows only urban warfare or battles in cleared terrain. They've stripped their worlds bare. Fighting in dense vegetation would be completely foreign to them. Their environmental suits looked pretty delicate too," added Captain William Wild Bill Hawthorne of the British SAS, a ghost of a smile playing across his face. "Be a shame if something happened to them in all that primitive vegetation they're so fond of mocking." Sullivan studied the global deployment map projected on the main screen. Green dots marked Special Forces units already quietly positioning themselves in Earth's major wilderness areas. How long until they drop the diplomatic act? "Intel suggests less than 48 hours, Hayes replied. "They're already mobilizing their invasion fleet. They'll target the Amazon first, biggest undeveloped region. Maximum psychological impact." Sullivan allowed himself a small smile. "Then we'll give them their first lesson in Earth's primitive warfare. They want to see proper development." He traced a line through the Amazon basin. "We'll develop some properly nasty surprises for them." The room hummed with quiet determination as Earth's most elite warriors began planning how to turn humanity's primitive wilderness into a killing ground for an enemy that had forgotten what it meant to fear the dark spaces between the stars. The Amazon rainforest breathed around Major Sullivan as he crouched in his observation post, the canopy above filtering the harsh noon sun into dappled shadows. 48 hours had passed since the Zexteri's ultimatum, and Earth's response had been simple: silence. His earpiece crackled. Sierra Actual, movement in upper atmosphere. They're coming. Captain Hawthorne's British accent carried none of its usual humor. From his position 10 kilometers east, the SAS operator had the best view of their sector's sky through a gap in the canopy. Sullivan checked his adapted gear one final time. Everything designed to work with the forest, not against it. No powered armor like the Zexteri used. Just advanced camouflage that mimicked the natural patterns of bark and leaves, weapons tested to function in extreme humidity, and communication devices hardened against the electrical interference that the jungle's dense biomass naturally created. All units, maintain radio discipline. Colonel Hayes's voice came through, clear but quiet. Remember your training. Let them come to us. Through breaks in the canopy, Sullivan caught glimpses of massive ships entering the atmosphere. The Zexteri, true to their nature, made no attempt at subtlety. Their vessels blazed with artificial light, their energy signatures broadcasting contempt for any notion of stealth. "Look at these arrogant bastards," Hawthorne whispered over the secure channel. "They're landing in a standard urban assault pattern. They think they're taking Rio de Janeiro, not the bloody Amazon." Sullivan's trained eye confirmed it. The aliens were deploying as if the jungle was just an inconvenient obstacle to be brushed aside. Their dropships descended in precise geometric formations, designed for covering maximum ground in open terrain or city streets. The first sign that things wouldn't go as the Zexteri planned came when their landing zones proved less stable than their scans had suggested. Sullivan watched through his binoculars as a massive transport settled onto what looked like solid ground, only to sink several feet into the deceptively sturdy-looking surface of a bog. "First blood goes to the swamp," someone murmured over the comm. The Zexteri troops emerged from their ships wearing environmental suits that gleamed with technology, and immediately began struggling with the humidity. Their advanced sensors, designed to penetrate concrete and metal, sent back confused readings as millions of living things created a biological storm of background noise. Sullivan's earpiece caught fragments of their communications, translated in real time. Interference on all bands, unable to establish baseline. Environmental controls malfunctioning. Grid coordinates unreliable. "Sierra teams, check in," Hayes ordered quietly. "Sierra 1, in position. Sierra 2, ready. Sierra 3, good to go." The check-ins continued, each team of Special Forces operators confirming their readiness. They weren't alone. Brazilian GRUMEC units held positions to the south, their lifetime of experience in the rainforest making them invisible even to Sullivan's trained eye. To the north, indigenous scouts who knew every whisper of the jungle had integrated with Canadian JTF-2 teams, creating a web of surveillance that the Zexteri's technology couldn't hope to detect. "Contact," came a whisper over the comm. 3-man patrol heading into Sector 7. They're using cutting tools on the vegetation. Sullivan allowed himself a grim smile. The aliens were literally trying to carve a straight path through the jungle, marking their trail as clearly as if they were painting targets on their backs. "All units hold," Hayes commanded. "Let them establish their pattern. We've got movement in all sectors. They're spreading out exactly as predicted." Through his scope, Sullivan watched a Zexteri soldier attempt to scan a massive cheba tree, probably trying to determine if it could be used as a vantage point. The alien's frustration was visible as the scanner failed to penetrate the dense wood. These creatures, so adapted to their artificial environments, couldn't comprehend a world that refused to conform to their technological expectations. "Sierra Actual to all units," Sullivan whispered, knowing every Special Forces operator in range was listening. Remember the briefing. We're not here to fight them head-on. The jungle is our ally, and we're about to show them why their ancestors learned to fear the dark spaces between the trees. As if nature itself approved, a distant thunder rolled through the canopy. The hunt was about to begin. The first Zexteri patrol died without ever seeing their killers. Sullivan watched through his scope as Hawthorne's team struck with brutal efficiency. No rifles, no explosions, just carbon fiber arrows tipped with neurotoxins derived from native tree frogs, delivered by compound boughs that left no heat signature for alien sensors to detect. Sierra 2, 3 targets neutralized, Hawthorne whispered. Moving to extract their tech. Negative. Hayes cut in. Let them rot. The jungle will consume them, and their command will waste resources trying to figure out what happened. Sullivan shifted position, the specially designed ghillie suit making him indistinguishable from the surrounding vegetation. Above, the afternoon rain began its daily descent, right on schedule. He smiled as Zexteri communications grew increasingly frantic. Environmental systems critical. Moisture levels exceeding tolerances. Biosignatures everywhere. Unable to establish baseline. The rain grew heavier, and Sullivan's team struck next. A 6 alien patrol splashed through a shallow stream, their sensors useless in the downpour. They never noticed the slight discoloration of the water, the nearly invisible lines running through the mud. Sullivan thumbed the detonator. The stream erupted, not with explosions, but with a carefully calculated mix of native stinging plants and disturbed insects. The Zexteri environmental suits, designed to withstand energy weapons and shrapnel, offered no protection against the microscopic barbs that found every seam and joint. Breach in Sector 12. Multiple suits compromised. Medical emergency. That's how you fight a jungle war, Sullivan muttered, remembering his old instructor's words. Let the environment do the heavy lifting. The next 3 hours demonstrated why Earth's special forces were feared even among their own kind. A Brazilian GRUMEC team used the canopy as a highway, moving above a Zexteri squadron with predatory grace. Their vibration charges, planted on specific trees, created a cascade of falling branches and vines that separated 3 aliens from their unit. Those 3 disappeared without a trace. The Zexteri response was predictable, and exactly what Earth's commanders had hoped for. They deployed their heavy weapons, their energy cannons carving glowing paths through the vegetation. But each destroyed section of jungle only created more cover, more chaos, more opportunities for the defenders to strike and vanish. Sierra Actual, new contact. Lieutenant Davidson's voice was tense. They're deploying some kind of automated hunters, 6-legged, about the size of wolves. Sullivan switched positions again, moving through the undergrowth like a ghost. He caught glimpses of the new threats, sleek, metallic creatures that moved with unnervingly organic grace. But they had a fatal flaw. All units, hold position, he ordered. Let's see how their toys handle the welcome party. The hunter drones moved in perfect formation, their sensors sweeping for human heat signatures. They found plenty, all belonging to the native wildlife that Earth's forces had deliberately stirred up. Jaguars, tapirs, and countless smaller creatures moved through the jungle, creating a biological noise that overwhelmed the drone's targeting systems. Then the indigenous guides sprung their trap. Carefully placed territorial markers, collected from predator species, triggered instinctive responses in the local fauna. The jungle erupted into a chaos of territorial displays and threat responses. The hunter drones, programmed to target any aggressive movement, spun in circles, unable to distinguish friend from foe. Now, Sullivan commanded. Dozens of small charges detonated simultaneously, not explosives but specialized EMP devices designed to mimic lightning strikes, a natural occurrence in the Amazon. The hunter drones dropped like stones, their sophisticated circuits fried by what would appear to be a natural phenomenon. Status report, Hayes demanded. The responses came in quick succession. No human casualties. 17 confirmed Zexteri kills. 4 captured environmental suits for analysis. 3 drone units disabled. And most importantly, not a single defender's position revealed. They're pulling back to their landing zones, Hawthorne reported, satisfaction evident in his voice. Looks like they're calling in their heavy armor. Because that's exactly what you want in a swamp. Sullivan keyed his comm. All units, maintain discipline. Remember, we're not trying to win the war today. We're teaching them to fear the dark. As if emphasizing his words, a distant Zexteri scream echoed through the canopy, quickly silenced by the endless symphony of jungle sounds. The aliens were learning, but the lesson had only begun. 3 days into the invasion, Major Sullivan crouched in the hollow of a massive kapok tree, listening to the Zexteri command channel through a captured communicator. The aliens' initially confident transmissions had devolved into something approaching panic. 4th Squadron lost in Sector 9. No bodies recovered. Environment is hostile. The vegetation itself attacks. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the carnage below. A Zexteri heavy armor unit lay half-submerged in the swamp, its crew missing. The sophisticated walker, designed for urban combat, had proven worse than useless in the flooded terrain. Its legs, optimized for gripping concrete and metal, found no purchase in the soft earth. Sierra Actual to command, Sullivan whispered. You getting their transmissions? Colonel Hayes's response was immediate. Affirmative. Their combat doctrine is falling apart. They've lost 28% of their ground forces and still haven't confirmed a single human casualty. A series of bird calls echoed through the canopy, except they weren't birds. Captain Hawthorne's team was signaling from their sector. 3 short whistles, 2 long. Major enemy movement. All units, go dark, Sullivan ordered. Let's see what they're bringing to the party. The answer came in the form of massive floating platforms hovering above the canopy. Searchlights pierced the darkness as Zexteri commanders attempted to gain some advantage over the terrain that had swallowed their ground forces. They still don't get it, Lieutenant Davidson muttered over the comm. They think technology will save them. Sullivan watched as the platforms began systematically burning away sections of the canopy, creating clearings where they thought they could establish secure positions. It was exactly what Earth's commanders had anticipated and prepared for. Execute Phase 3. Hayes's voice was cold. Show them why we let them take their time up there. Years of careful environmental management had created layers of organic material in the jungle substrate. When the Zexteri burned away the canopy, they didn't realize they were releasing centuries of stored biological material. The smoke that rose from their destruction carried microscopic spores, specifically cultivated by Earth scientists to target the filtration systems of alien environmental suits. First signs of suit degradation in Sector 5, Hawthorne reported with grim satisfaction. Their filters are clogging, and they have no idea it's intentional. Sullivan moved through the understory, his team flowing around him like shadows. They'd positioned themselves near one of the newly created clearings, waiting. Above, Zexteri troops were beginning to experience the first effects of their compromised environmental systems. Multiple unit failures, atmospheric contamination, unable to maintain seal integrity. The aliens' response was predictable. They called for emergency evacuation to their hovering platforms. As they ascended on gravity lifts, Sullivan gave the signal. Brazilian GRUMBC snipers, their positions impossibly well hidden in the remaining canopy, opened fire, not on the Zexteri troops, but on the gravitic generators of their evacuation platforms. Specialized ammunition, designed to disrupt the alien technology's field harmonics, found their marks. The platforms didn't explode. They simply stopped working. Beautiful, Sullivan breathed as the massive structures slowly, almost gracefully, settled into the clearings their creators had made. The Zexteri troops, their suits failing and their elevated positions lost, faced a terrible choice: stay in their disabled platforms or descend into the jungle that had already claimed so many of their comrades. Sierra lead. New transmission intercepted, Hayes reported. Patching it through. The voice that came through Sullivan's earpiece was different from the usual Zexteri communications. Higher ranked, more controlled, but with an unmistakable edge of fear. All units, priority override. These humans, they haven't failed to tame their wilderness. They've weaponized it. Tactical withdrawal to orbital positions authorized. Ground forces are tow. The transmission cut off as the spores finally overwhelmed the command platform's communications array. All teams, maintain surveillance, Sullivan ordered. Let's make sure they remember this retreat. As the surviving Zexteri forces attempted to disengage, the jungle seemed to come alive around them. Every step away from their failing equipment took them deeper into humanity's domain, where the line between natural hazard and deliberate trap had been carefully, expertly erased. The lesson was clear. Earth's wilderness wasn't untamed. It was precisely as tamed as humanity wanted it to be. Incoming. Davidson's voice crackled through the comm as the sky lit up with unnatural fire. The Zexteri had finally deployed their elite mechanized units, 20-story war machines that walked on articulated legs, bristling with enough firepower to level a city. Sullivan watched from his concealed position as the first of these titans descended through the clouds, its metallic carapace gleaming with artificial light. "Command, are you seeing this?" "Affirmative," Colonel Hayes responded. "They're calling them world breakers. Apparently, they've saved their best for last." 5 of the massive machines touched down, their feet crushing acres of rainforest with each step. Their arrival was accompanied by a booming transmission that echoed through the jungle. "Primitive humans, your wilderness will not save you now. These world breakers have conquered civilizations far beyond your comprehension. Surrender or watch your precious forest burn." Hawthorne's laugh came through the comm. "Someone should tell them that's not how you make friends in the Amazon." Sullivan keyed his radio. "All units, execute Operation Titan's Fall, just like we practiced." The human response began subtly. Indigenous guides, working with Special Forces teams, had spent days preparing the terrain. The ground beneath the world breakers looked solid but consisted of carefully constructed layers of vegetation covering deep natural sinkholes. The first Titan took 3 more steps before the ground gave way. Its massive leg plunged into the earth, throwing the machine off balance. Automated systems tried to compensate, but they were calibrated for urban warfare, not the treacherous ground of a prepared rainforest. "Look at that," Davidson whispered. 20 stories of advanced alien technology, and they didn't think to check the ground beneath their feet. The world breaker's attempts to free itself only made things worse. Each movement drove it deeper into the morass. Its companions tried to help, but their own position was just as precarious. "Sierra teams, Phase 2, Sullivan ordered. Special Forces units emerged from hiding, not to attack, but to draw fire. The world breakers' targeting systems locked onto the movement, and their weapon arrays opened up with devastating force. Energy beams and plasma bolts tore through the vegetation, and missed completely as the humans seemed to melt into the jungle. "They're overheating," Hawthorne reported with satisfaction. "The humidity's playing hell with their cooling systems." He was right. The machine's energy weapons were designed for the cold vacuum of space or the controlled environments of civilized worlds. The Amazon's oppressive heat and moisture forced them to operate at reduced efficiency or risk catastrophic failure. Sullivan gave the signal for the next phase. Teams of Brazilian GRUMBC operators, using equipment specifically designed for this moment, began launching specialized grappling lines. The ultra-strong carbon fiber ropes, nearly invisible in the dim light, wrapped around the Titan's legs. "Now we show them how we deal with giants," Sullivan muttered, triggering the signal. Synchronized explosions erupted across the battlefield, not directed at the world breakers, but at key points in the surrounding terrain. Mudslides, triggered with precise timing, cascaded around the massive machines. Their legs, already entangled, couldn't find purchase in the liquefying ground. The first Titan fell like a great tree, its impact shaking the earth. The others soon followed, their advanced targeting systems blinded by mud and organic debris, their powerful weapons useless against the very environment itself. "Command, targets are down," Sullivan reported, watching as the mighty world breakers flailed helplessly in the mud. "Permission to deliver the message." "Granted," Hayes replied. "Make it clear." Sullivan switched to the captured Zexteri command frequency. His words, translated into their language, carried across the battlefield. "Your machines can break worlds, but we learn to bend them. This jungle isn't our weakness, it's our strength. Consider this your final warning." To emphasize the point, the Special Forces teams withdrew, leaving the mighty world breakers to sink slowly into the earth. Their crews would survive. The humans had made sure of that, but they would return to their fleet with an indelible lesson. On Earth, nature itself was a weapon, and its masters were not to be underestimated. In the distance, thunder rolled through the canopy, a sound that the Zexteri would learn to fear more than any weapon of war. "Target of opportunity," Hawthorne's voice cut through the pre-dawn silence. "Command ship, hovering low over Sector 7. They're trying to salvage what's left of their world breakers." Sullivan peered through his advanced optics at the massive vessel. Its sleek design spoke of technological superiority, but after a week of jungle warfare, its once pristine hull was scarred by organic matter and atmospheric corrosion. The Zexteri hadn't planned for extended operations in Earth's primitive environment. "All teams, converge on my position," Sullivan ordered. "This is what we've been waiting for." Through the canopy, he could see the command ship's gravitational tethers extending down to the fallen war machines. The Zexteri were making the same mistake again, assuming that technology alone would solve their problems. Sierra Actual to command. Permission to execute Operation Honeytrap. Colonel Hayes' response was immediate. "Granted. The indigenous teams report all preparations are complete. Show them why you never lower your guard in the Amazon." The trap had been days in the making. While the Zexteri focused on their failed ground assault, local tribes had worked with Special Forces teams to prepare the entire sector. The fallen world breakers weren't just sinking into mud. They were being guided into position by an intricate network of underground rivers and carefully weakened soil structures. "All units, commence Phase 1, Sullivan whispered. The response was beautiful in its coordination. Brazilian GRUMBC teams triggered their charges first, collapsing key portions of the riverbank. Water rushed into prepared channels, further destabilizing the ground beneath the world breakers. The massive machines began to shift, putting strain on the command ship's gravitational tethers. "They're increasing power to compensate," Davidson reported, monitoring the alien frequencies. "Their engineers are warning about system overload, but command is pushing ahead." Sullivan smiled grimly. "Execute Phase 2. Special Forces snipers, their positions scattered throughout the canopy, opened fire on the tether's emission points. Their ammunition, developed from analysis of captured Zexteri technology, wasn't designed to destroy, only to disrupt the gravitational field's coherence. The effect was devastating. As the fields fluctuated, the strain on the command ship's engines doubled, then tripled. The vessel's automatic systems tried to compensate, drawing more power to the tethers, creating a feedback loop that the Zexteri engineers hadn't thought possible. "She's dropping altitude," Hawthorne called out with satisfaction. "Their anti-grav systems are failing." The command ship, unable to maintain its position, descended closer to the canopy, exactly as planned. "All teams, Phase 3. Show them what they've been ignoring." Years of studying the rainforest's canopy had taught humanity its secrets. The upper layers weren't just leaves and branches. They were an interconnected network that could, with proper preparation, support significant weight. As the command ship dropped lower, it found itself entangled in a web of reinforced vines and cables disguised as natural growth. Multiple system failures, unable to achieve lift. Biological contamination in all sectors. The Zexteri communications grew increasingly frantic. Sullivan keyed his radio. "Command, we have their flagship. Permission to board." "Granted," Hayes responded. "Take Lieutenant Davidson's linguistics team. We need their tactical database." The boarding operation was almost anticlimactic. The Zexteri crew, their environmental systems compromised by the same spores that had devastated their ground forces, could barely resist. Their automated defenses, designed for repelling attacks in space or urban environments, proved useless against soldiers who appeared to materialize from the very walls through hidden access points created by the vessel's contact with the canopy. Within an hour, Sullivan stood on the command ship's bridge, watching as Davidson's team downloaded the alien tactical database. The information streaming across their screens confirmed what they'd suspected. The Zexteri had never encountered a species that turned their environment into a weapon rather than trying to overpower it. "Send word to command," Sullivan ordered, looking out over the jungle that had become humanity's greatest ally. "Tell them Phase 1 is complete. The Zexteri are about to learn that we haven't even started fighting back yet." As if in response, distant thunder rolled through the Amazon, nature's applause for humanity's impending counterattack. The captured Zexteri command ship's bridge hummed with activity as Major Sullivan studied the holographic display of the alien fleet in orbit. Thanks to Davidson's linguistic team cracking their encryption, they could now see the full extent of the invasion force and its vulnerabilities. "Their ships are designed for vacuum and urban environments," Sullivan observed, pointing to the fleet's formation. "Just like their ground forces, they'd never adapted to deal with less controlled conditions. Look at their hull composition," Hawthorne added, his finger tracing the ethereal outline of a Zexteri warship. "Same weaknesses as their environmental suits. They're not ready for biological contamination." Colonel Hayes's voice came through their secured channel. "Then it's time for Phase 2. The indigenous leaders have assembled their warriors. Are you ready to show the Zexteri what a real joint operation looks like?" Sullivan turned to face the gathered force behind him. Brazilian GRUMTC operators stood shoulder to shoulder with tribal warriors from deep in the Amazon, their modern weapons complementing traditional blowguns now loaded with engineered toxins. British SAS members checked equipment alongside indigenous hunters whose generations of knowledge had helped devise their most devastating traps. "Remember," Sullivan addressed the assembled warriors, "everything we've done until now was defensive. We let them think we were just protecting our territory. Now we show them why you never corner a predator in its own hunting ground." The plan was audacious. Using data from the captured command ship, they had identified a critical weakness in Zexteri ship design. Their atmospheric processors couldn't handle high concentrations of organic material. The same feature that made their environmental suits vulnerable could be their fleet's undoing. "Chieftain Ryoni," Sullivan nodded to the elderly tribal leader who had been instrumental in their strategy. "Your people's knowledge made this possible." The chieftain, his face painted with traditional war markings that now incorporated patterns that confuse Zexteri sensors, smiled grimly. "For generations, we have been called primitive for living with the forest rather than against it. Today, we show them true power." The attack began at dawn. While the main Zexteri fleet maintained orbit, their support ships had to cycle through the atmosphere for resupply runs. As one such vessel descended through the cloud layer, it encountered something unprecedented in the aliens' military history: a coordinated assault from an entire ecosystem. Indigenous knowledge had identified the perfect mixture of spores, pollens, and microscopic organisms that, when released at the right altitude, would create a biological storm. Special Forces teams, using captured Zexteri gravity tech, had positioned dispersal units in the upper canopy. When the supply ship passed through, it flew into a cloud of organic material that their sensors registered too late. "Target is contaminated," Davidson reported, monitoring the alien communications. "Their filtration systems are overloading. They're trying to purge, but it's too late." The supply ship, its systems compromised, was forced to return to the fleet. But it carried more than system failure. It transported the seeds of the fleet's destruction. The same biological agents that had doomed their ground forces were now being introduced directly into their supposedly secure ships. Second wave, initiate, Sullivan ordered. Across the Amazon, more teams launched their attacks. Each supply run encountered new combinations of biological agents, each carefully selected to target different systems. The Zexteri, their confidence already shaken by their ground defeats, now faced an enemy they couldn't fight. Nature itself, weaponized by those they had dismissed as primitive. Multiple ships reporting critical failures, Davidson called out, his voice tight with excitement. Their fleet formations are breaking down. They're retreating to higher orbit. Sullivan watched the holographic display as Zexteri ships began pulling back, trying to escape the invisible threat that had invaded their vessels. But it was too late. The contamination had spread through their fleet's interconnected life support systems. Send the message, Hayes commanded. Let's make sure they understand exactly what happened here. Sullivan keyed the captured communications array, broadcasting on all Zexteri frequencies. You thought our wilderness made us weak. Now you understand. We are not trapped in this environment. We are its masters. And you are merely its latest lesson. The forests seemed to pulse with victory as humanity's defenders watched their enemies flee from the power they had so fatally underestimated. 10 years after the Zexteri retreat, Major James Sullivan, now Colonel Sullivan, stood before a class of alien military observers in the heart of the Amazon Combat Academy. The facility, built within the rainforest canopy itself, had become the most prestigious military training center in the known galaxy. Welcome to Advanced Earth Combat Studies, Sullivan addressed the diverse group of alien species. You're here because your governments recognize what the Zexteri learned the hard way. That true military advancement isn't about conquering your environment, but becoming one with it. Behind him, Captain William Hawthorne, now Chief Instructor of Special Operations, activated a holographic display showing the infamous World Breaker defeat. Several alien observers shifted uncomfortably in their environmentally adjusted seats. The Zexteri made a fundamental mistake, Sullivan continued, gesturing to the fallen war machines. They saw our wilderness as a weakness to be exploited. Instead, it became the weapon that destroyed their invasion force. The lecture hall itself was a testament to humanity's philosophy. Built using living trees and advanced biotechnology, it could disappear into the canopy within minutes if needed. Every surface doubled as both classroom and potential combat position, a design that had revolutionized military architecture across the galaxy. Your civilizations have achieved remarkable things, Sullivan acknowledged, pacing before the assembled aliens. But today's lesson isn't about technology. It's about adaptation. He brought up another hologram, this one showing indigenous warriors working alongside special forces operators, their combined knowledge creating tactics that had become legendary. The Zexteri called us primitive for maintaining our wild spaces. They never understood that these environments weren't untamed. They were perfectly balanced weapons, honed over generations. Davidson, now director of xenolinguistics, stepped forward to translate as a tribal elder demonstrated traditional hunting techniques that had been adapted for modern combat. The alien observers watched in fascination as simple botanical knowledge was transformed into sophisticated battlefield tactics. Earth is now recognized as a Class 10 death world. Sullivan continued, allowing himself a small smile. Not because of our technology, but because we've maintained our connection to our world's most powerful forces. Every jungle, every desert, every ocean is both a home and a potential battlefield. The display shifted to show current footage of Earth's other military academies, the Desert Warfare School in the Sahara, the Arctic Combat Center in Alaska, the Deep Ocean Training Facility in the Pacific, each one teaching the lessons learned during the Zexteri invasion. That nature, properly understood, was the ultimate weapon. Your final exercise, Hawthorne announced, his scared face breaking into a grin, will be to survive 3 days in this rainforest. Not with your advanced technology, but with tools we provide. Those who pass will understand why Earth's wilderness is now more feared than any fleet. As if on cue, thunder rolled through the canopy. Several alien observers jumped, their species' instincts still unused to natural phenomena. Sullivan noticed their reaction and nodded slowly. That sound once meant nothing to the Zexteri. By the end of their invasion, it terrified them more than any weapon. Your societies have chosen wisely by seeking to learn from our victory rather than repeat their mistake. He gestured to the massive windows, where the Amazon stretched endlessly in every direction. Earth didn't just repel an invasion. We changed how the galaxy thinks about warfare, about progress, about the very meaning of civilization. The Zexteri thought they were our superiors because they had conquered their environment. Now their empire is a cautionary tale, taught in military academies across the stars. As the class prepared for their survival exercise, Sullivan received an urgent message. Another spacefaring race had been detected approaching Earth's solar system. Their ships were massive, their technology advanced, but their sensors were already probing Earth's primitive wilderness zones with obvious respect. Send them the standard greeting, Sullivan instructed command, and remind them that Earth's Special Forces Academy is accepting new students. The message was clear. Humanity hadn't just defended their world, they had transformed their perceived weakness into the galaxy's most respected strength. The wilderness that aliens once mocked had become the ultimate teacher, and Earth's mastery of it had become the standard by which true military power was measured. Thunder rolled again through the Amazon, nature's approval of how far its students had come.